because if people could, they would. So there's a natural tendency of people to want to move their capital from a less secure, more chaotic, more uncertain place, maybe where their property rights are less. I mean, you remember remember in Cuba when the boat people, when everybody wanted to leave Cuba and come to Florida, right? People generally want to move from the less secure to the more secure place. They want to move their person, they want to move their money, etc. It's human nature. I think if we come to this siphon analogy, well, there's just so much energy that gets released when you move from an uncertain, unsafe environment to a more certain, safer, more sound environment. That sometimes you don't have to convince people. Like, for example, a lot of times, if the head of the household could leave a war zone, don't you think they'd bring their entire family with them? Like, the kids might not want to go. My dad made me go to places I didn't want to go. You know why? When I was growing up, because his job. You know, how many children go to a place they don't want to go because their parents get a job in the bank? 4%. When you hold that money in the S&P index with the volatility of the VIX or 15, you might get paid 12 to 15% interest to take the risk of holding one share of SPY, the index. When you hold a share of Bitcoin via IBIT or a Bitcoin, the volatility is 60. You might get paid 70%, 80% to hold that $1 million in Bitcoin, and you're taking the downside risk, but you're getting paid that call rate. When you hold a share of MicroStrategy, if you were holding $1 million of MicroStrategy and you were selling the calls at the market with 120 vol, you could get paid 200% annual interest. You might not even know what it is. Like, you don't know what Bitcoin is. You don't know what MicroStrategy does. All you know is that if it's not going to zero in the next 12 months, someone will pay you 200% interest. So your break-even point is 6 months, right? It's like, if I can hold Bitcoin ecosystem, Tom, from investors that don't understand Bitcoin, they just want to do convertible arbitrage, or they want to do option trading. There are a lot of people that hate Bitcoin, and they come into the ecosystem because they just want to short my stock. So they short my stock and buy Bitcoin and create demand for Bitcoin, you see. So those are all secondary and tertiary investors. They have capital, they have money, and they want to play some game, whether it's short, long, trading, fixed income. People that have bought my bonds and they just wanted interest on the bonds, and they indirectly funded Bitcoin. So my company is an actor to recruit other investors. Anybody else in the ecosystem is recruiting other investors. But the fundamental physics of this equation is, this is the world's first perfect money. That's Bitcoin, the asset, and Bitcoin, the network, is the greatest global open capital network in the world. It is free digital capital, 24/7 cash. Okay, that's a risk they take. They give me the $3 billion. It's an obligation I take, and then I take the $3 billion. By the way, if I took the $3 billion and I bet it on black in a casino and I lost it, I took a stupid risk. I lost your money. The equity holders are hurting. I'm going to have to dilute the equity or come up with the $3 billion some other way, right? So I can do something irresponsible. You are trusting the management team of an operating company to not do stupid things. But let's say I take the $3 billion and I buy Bitcoin with it.
We'll get back to the show in just a moment, but first, let's talk about future-proofing your business. In business, your competition isn't just other companies, it's time itself. While everyone's arguing about bull markets and interest rates, leaders are busy seizing opportunities, and that is where NetSuite comes in. Over 38,000 businesses use it to see clearly in uncertain times. It's not just another business tool. It brings your entire operation into one powerful platform.
The beneficiary is the common stock shareholder, right? The guy that bought MSTR stock. So I'm doing I just generated $750 million in like 3 days, you see. So you're saying, what is it that I can do that a trust can't do? They can't make $750 million in 3 days. If I go sell $1 billion of equity and my equity is trading at 3 times the underlying asset, I'm selling $1 billion of equity backed by $333 million of Bitcoin, but I'm buying back $1 billion of Bitcoin and I'm capturing $666 million in the arbitrage. So as an if I were to go borrow $1 billion and just pay 6% interest on a junk bond, well, then you're just getting $1 billion of Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin goes up less than 6% a year, that was not a good risk. I would lose money on that. But if Bitcoin's going up 60% a year, I'm going to scrape a 54% yield and I'm going to make, $540 million a year for my share for you and modern heating and air conditioning and a chef, and 3 cars and a helicopter in the back, and you've got a dinner party planned and you're walking past a little flickering fire. You're probably going to think I should put it out. I'm probably going to step on that fire because it looks like a threat to me. Microsoft is probably one of the 5 most successful companies in the world out of 50,000 publicly traded companies and 400 million private companies. They're not exactly the shivering, naked, starving dude running through the forest on the mountainside, right? They don't need it. It's quite optional for them, right? The people that discover Bitcoin are when you live in Nigeria and the bank or Lebanon and the bank freezes your assets and you're either going to starve to death and be bankrupt or you're going to have learned about Bitcoin, they have a need to know. If you live in a hyperinflating economy in Russia or in Venezuela or in Argentina, you're going to know. If you remember your family fleeing Nazi Germany in the 30s and losing everything, if that story's been for yourself, make fame and fortune, you pick the new technology, right? And then the other group of people that embrace new technology are people in a war zone, right? People dismiss, remember World War I and we had horses and cavalry and like, oh, that doesn't work. And then people dismiss the Air Force. They court-martialed Billy Mitchell, I guess. Air power, that'll never mean anything. And then people stop dropping bombs on your head and you become a believer in air power. And so I think the real phrase from Max Planck, and he said it in the history of science and the study of science, he said, science advances one funeral at a time. It's like the old guard doesn't have a need to know. They're going to reject it. The younger generation, they do have a need to know. And then people that are under duress, that are fighting for their life, they, maybe you'll start the war, not believing in airplanes and believing that we should fight with horses, and swords, but you won't end the war with a general that believes that, right? And take clear title of it in Manhattan. What do you think the transaction fees are on that? Right? I mean, you could spend $1 million to move $1 billion. You could easily spend 10 basis points. How about the last time you sold your house? What's the transaction fees to sell a house to someone else? And how long does it take, by the way? Right. So when you think about it that way, like if I could sell my house in 30 days and it was $1 million house, would I pay 1%, 2%, 3%, 4% interest or in fees? Yeah, I would. If I paid 1% fees, I think that's cheap. Well, 1% fees on $1 million transfer of Bitcoin, right? That's going to support the network. So the beauty is, I don't think the transaction, I think Bitcoin's always going to be 100 times to 1,000 times more efficient to transact in than other instruments. But I do think there will be transaction fees. I think the fees will support the mining network. And the mining will continue forever because there's always going to be stranded energy and there's always going to be stranded capital. And so if you're sitting at the edge of the grid and you have a dam in the Himalayas, well, you're going to want to run Bitcoin mining with the dam in the Himalayas because that's the highest bidder for your electricity.